It is so chewy and fluffy and tender. Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. Today we're going to be trying out Cupcake Jemma's recipe for hot cross buns. Looking through the ingredient list, it's lots of warm spices along with dried fruit, so I like the sound of all of that. Traditionally, hot cross buns are apparently eaten on Good Friday, which is coming up this week, so it's the perfect time to try this one out. Not a lot of special ingredients, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Cupcake Jemma's version calls for instant yeast. However, I'm going to be using active dry today. Upon Googling this, you can substitute them one-to-one. You just need to proof the active dry yeast first. So it's 10 grams, 1.5 teaspoons here in a small bowl. And then to that, I'm going to give it a little bit of the sugar that we've measured out for the rest of the recipe. This will just help feed that yeast a little bit. Then I've also got our water here, which I brought up to the boil and then allowed to cool down slightly. So I'm going to pour just a small portion of the water in here and stir it with that active dry yeast and sugar to get everything incorporated. So I'm going to let this hang out for about 5 minutes. Hopefully during that time it's going to get foamy, bubbly, and fragrant. In the meantime though, let's prep all the other ingredients for the dough. So here in a large bowl, I've got my bread flour. To that we're going to add in the granulated sugar, along with kosher salt. And I'm actually using Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt rather than whatever salt Cupcake Jemma used. She said it was 2 teaspoons equals 10 grams. For Diamond Crystal, it was 3 teaspoons equals 10 grams. Last, we've got mixed spice, which is something I could not find at any store near me. Fortunately, Google came to the rescue again and I found a DIY version of mixed spice. Here I've got some nutmeg, ground cloves, and cinnamon, and then the additional cinnamon that we're using in the recipe. So I'll pop that all in here, and then we'll just whisk to combine. And with this evenly combined, we're ready to start assembling the dough. So now here in the bowl of the stand mixer, we're going to add in our prepared dry ingredients, along with 1 egg at room temperature, some unsalted butter at room temperature. And it's only been about 3 minutes, but our yeast is looking nice and foamy, so we can pour this in. And then adding in the rest of the water, which has been cooling down at room temperature while we did everything else. So it's slightly warm. And since we're making dough, and a quite sticky dough at that, we are going to be using the dough hook today. So we'll go ahead and slop this on here and start mixing over low speed to get everything moistened. So mixing over kind of a medium-low speed here, just until all of those dry ingredients get moistened up, and then we can crank the speed up to medium-high. So after about 30 seconds of mixing, the dry ingredients are pretty well incorporated to the wet and everything looks nice and moistened. So we can crank the speed up to medium-high and knead this for about 10 to 15 minutes. So we've been kneading for about 3 minutes at this point, and Cupcake Jemma recommends stopping the mixer and allowing that gluten to relax just for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then resume mixing over that medium-high speed to continue kneading until we reach the desired visual cues. So this is done relaxing, let's crank that speed back up. And that's been another 3 minutes, so I'm going to let the dough relax just for about 30 to 45 more seconds. And you can see the texture here after 6 minutes total of mixing. It is quite sticky, however, it does look very smooth and glossy. So far, it's pretty well clearing the edge of the bowl. I do have a little bit of residue sticking along the top. So I'll just do a quick scrape to make sure that that stuff is getting evenly incorporated as well. And that's been a little over 45 seconds of resting, so let's get back to mixing. Going over medium-high for another 3 minutes. All right, so this has been mixing for a total of 8 minutes at this point. However, I'm going to call it here because the visual cue that we were looking for was for the dough to clear the bowl while it was mixing. And so you can see all along the edges, this dough is just pulling away cleanly. So I don't want to over knead this. So I'm going to stop here and move on to the next step. At this point, we're going to add in the dried fruit. And I ordered this box off Amazon because it had all of the ingredients that Cupcake Jemma recommended. It includes sultans, dried cherries, currants, mixed peel. However, if you don't want to order this, by all means, plain raisins, plain cherries, you name it, it's totally fine. So I'll just dump these all in, and then we'll mix this over medium-low just until the fruits are mostly incorporated. Obviously at this point the dough is mostly come together, so it will be a little bit difficult to get those dried fruits evenly incorporated. However, Cupcake Jemma said it'll happen, just give it time and persevere. So I've got my timer running and I'll let you all know about how long it took so you have a benchmark of what to expect. All right, so that's been about 1.5 minutes. I do want to scrape the dough hook off just to ensure that we're getting an even incorporation. And we'll mix this for another 1.5 minutes or so. All right, perfect. So the fruit mixed in for a total of about 3 minutes, and I'm really happy with how it's looking. The dough is clearing the bowl really nicely, so I think we're in great shape with this so far. So with the dough evenly incorporated, we're ready to let it do its first rise. So I've got a large bowl here that's been greased with some vegetable oil. I'm going to use my scraper just to get the dough out and into this bowl for rising. Perfect. I'm going to pop some cling film over the top of this, and we're going to set it somewhere warm to rise for about an hour until it's doubled in size. So I'll see you when we're ready to punch it down. Our dough's been rising for just about an hour at this point, so you can see it's definitely doubled in size here. It's still super sticky, so at this point what we need to do is degas it. So to do that, we're going to lightly dust our surface with some all-purpose flour, and then we'll just get the dough turned out onto the surface. And the approach we're doing here is kind of similar to the no-knead focaccia, where we're taking one side and just pulling it over and folding it kind of onto itself. All right, perfect. I'm going to pop this back into the same bowl here, and we will just let this rise for about 30 more minutes until it's close to doubled in size again. The dough rose for another 30 minutes, and you can see it's about doubled in size from where we were. So again, we're going to go onto a well-floured surface, and we want to make 12 even buns. So I'm going to start by cutting this in half. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and then we'll cut the halves in half, and then we can cut these into thirds, all about the same size to me. And the way we're going to form this is similar to the sour cream and chive rolls. So we've got kind of a rough square shape. So I'm just tucking the edges towards the center, giving a little bit of a pinch to lock it in, and then seam side down. Under a gentle palm, I'm just going to spin this in a circle to get everything to tighten up nicely. So you can see this looks great. Exactly the same technique as the sour cream and onions. This worked out perfectly. If you've got any little fruit bits that are sticking out, go ahead and stick those on the underside so they don't get burnt. And then I'm going to place this onto my prepared pan. And if you do want to use a scale, each bun should be about 100 grams. The technique I'm using here is actually a slight departure from what Cupcake Jemma recommended. She said to roll the balls on a floured surface. However, as Claire noted in Dessert Person, you do want friction of the dough against your work surface. That's what's pulling it into a ball. So flour is the opposite of friction. That's why I'm not using it on my surface here. We've got our buns rolled out and they're mostly even. This one is a little bit larger, but overall pretty happy with how this worked out. So at this point, we need to cover this in cling film and let it rise for another 20 to 40 minutes until it's about doubled in size. When it's done, the buns should be close to touching each other on the tray. So I'll see you when we're ready to bake. Our buns have been rising for just over 30 minutes at this point, and now we're ready to make the secondary batter that makes the crosses on the top. So here in a medium-sized bowl, I've got some AP flour. To that, I'm adding some tap water at room temperature, along with a little bit of vegetable oil. All right, and that looks pretty good. So you can see it's quite loose, but this is exactly what we're looking for. And to get that nice even decoration on the top, we need to use a piping bag. So I've got a small piping bag here, and we'll just scrape the batter in there. So now we are ready to put the crosses onto the buns. So these are nearly doubled in size. It's been about 35 minutes here. I want to cut off just a small end here. And then in one single motion, I'm going from the long end of the bun and just slowly piping across the surface of all of the buns. I placed mine a little too far apart. Cupcake Jemmas all touched each other, but I think that's okay. Maybe they'll expand a bit more in the oven. And this cross batter may spread a little bit because it's quite loose, so you don't want to pipe it too thick. I'm doing maybe a ½ centimeter wide, thinking that it'll spread out to almost a centimeter. Also, this cross batter makes a little bit more than what you need for the buns, so if you've got some left over, don't worry about it. And so I do have a little bit of batter left over. Nothing you can really do with this. It's oil, water, and flour, so I don't think it's going to taste great on its own. And with that, we're ready to bake. So I'm going to pop these into our preheated 375-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes until they're nice and golden brown. You don't want to overbake these, so keep an eye on them. Our buns bake for a total of 20 minutes, and they are still nice and warm directly out of the oven. While they're still hot, we're going to brush them with apricot jam to give them some nice gloss and a little extra sweetness. I put maybe a quarter cup into the microwave just to warm it up and make it a little bit more brushable. I've got my OXO pastry brush here. We're just going to go across the surface. Perfect. So I'm going to let these cool off just for a little bit longer, and then we'll break one open and give it a taste. After brushing with apricot jam, I let these cool for another 5 minutes, and this is the end result. So you can see the cross pattern on the top is beautiful. We've got some nice rise on the bun, overall a really beautiful golden color, and the bottom is nice and bronzed as well. So I am loving how these look. Beyond the appearance though, these are so pillowy. When I think back to how pillowy the sour cream and onion rolls were from Claire, these are even more pillowy. So I am dying to dig in here. So let's do a little tear and see what the texture is like inside. Oh wow, there's still a little bit of steam coming off. I don't know if you can see it. The warm spices in there smell so great. So you can see it's really, really fluffy. The jam on the outside, surprisingly not sticky. I expected it to make like a messy situation, but it's not too bad. Oh my gosh. Wow. The texture here is absolutely incredible. It is so chewy and fluffy and tender. And all those little bits of dried fruit, it's just little bursts of sweetness. It's perfect. I like the amount of spice that we've got going on in the bread. It's very aromatic and warm without being overpowering. A lot of those warm spices can be quite strong. However, this is so well balanced. A little bit of crispiness on the edges. That's nice. I am so happy with these. The taste, texture, the amount of spice, the fruit, everything is really working for me. And from a process standpoint, this was so much simpler than Claire's sweet yeasted dough. And the texture is just as tender and delicious. So I am enthusiastically recommending that you give this one a go. Whether you have the special fruit or not, this would be delicious with just raisins or currants or cherries, whatever you have on hand. So I really hope that you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.